Hello and welcome back to Star Goblin Radio. We've got a Twitch stream from Skydawn Games to review. As usual, I'll boil down their hour-long discussion into a bite-sized chunk. The focus of the most recent Twitch stream was for the pre-orders and news around that. If you pre-ordered the book, it will be shipping out in early October, and you should have it in hand by the end of October at the latest. The digital files will be distributed through TTRPG, and we should have access to those the week of September 30th. And to whoever needs to hear this, if you pre-ordered the book and your address has changed, and you need to update that information, you have until September 29th to contact Skydawn Games and let them know. If you missed the pre-orders and still want a copy of the content, no worries. The content will be available in PDF form on both Skydawn Games and DriveThruRPG to purchase. And if you want to get your hands on a physical copy, the best way to do that is actually talking to your local gaming store. If you request that they order you a copy through Studio 2 Publishing, the distributor, it does a few things. It supports your local gaming shop, which is super important. It supports Skydawn Games, and it sends a message to Sega, letting them know that there are plenty of people out there interested in this RPG, which increases the chance that we will continue to get new content in the future after the launch of the core book. And now for some updates. The book itself contains everything that you need to play the game, though Skydawn did mention that not everything they wanted to include in the core book was able to fit due to page limitations and trying to make sure that they stayed on budget. The only content that they specifically named that didn't make the core book was some of the art, so I'm not really sure what this includes. However, they did say to look forward to free PDFs after the launch of the core book, which will provide extended content for the game. Speaking of additional content, we already know that anybody who pre-ordered gets a PDF of the core book and the starter adventure Search for Lavino. In addition, we will get a high-res map to use with the Search for Lavino that can be printed or used with a virtual tabletop, as well as some game tokens to use with a VTT. I'm not sure if we've already seen these before. It looks like there were some in the online images shared for playtesting of the Search for Lavino, and so it might just be character tokens of the original cast from Phantasy Star, and whatever these things are. And let's look at the future. So, Skydawn Games wants to continue to produce content for the Phantasy Star TTRPG. That's really exciting. I'm glad it's not just a one-and-done sort of situation. It's been confirmed that the adventure, The New Pioneers, which is going to be run at some future conventions, will be made available for purchase after the fact. The adventure will focus on the party, who is a group of space explorers and part of Project Pioneer. Project Pioneer being part of Phantasy Star Online lore and an effort by civilization to find a new hospitable planet called home. Once appropriately formatted, the adventure will be available on DriveThruRPG. There's a lot more content planned, though these next few bits are all pending Sega's licensing agreement. Some of these goals have been mentioned before. I'm going to briefly touch on them here, as we were provided some clarifying details on them, and the fact that they were brought up again shows that Skydawn Games is continuing to push to make these an actuality. Future goals include physical content, such as DM Screen, which they plan to include another first-level adventure with, Phantasy Star miniatures, more swag, a starter kit. Goals for digital content include VTT support for Roll20 and Foundry, and then they talked at length about supplemental content. The approach for this would be focused on setting specific content, picking one of the timelines, picking a specific time or place on that timeline, and then providing new rules focused on that specific setting. Several examples were provided. This would include support for the planets Rhaegal and Carol from Phantasy Star Online, rules for mags, faction support, additional character options like subclasses and more origins that are specific to these settings, and additional rules for the Game Master for things like equipment creation and Starship creation. I'd say the biggest thing announced was the desire to pursue Phantasy Star Universe. Phantasy Star Universe is not currently included in the core book because it falls under a completely different license than the original series and Phantasy Star Online. There have been a lot of people voicing their desire to get access to this additional PSU content, and it sounds like the game designer is well aware of it and also of the mind that he wants to implement it as well. So that's good news. It sounds like it's a priority, and hopefully if things go well with the sales of this first product, we will continue to get more content released with PSU as a frontrunner. For updates on the content within the core book itself, SkydawnGames.com now has the character sheets and the Starship sheets available. I've linked those in the description. It was confirmed that there are enemy Starship stat blocks in the core book. These are somewhat generic and can be used for multi-purposes depending on what the storyteller wants them to represent. We don't have examples of who your players might be fighting in space yet. I don't know if the core book is going to provide suggestions on that. First things that came to my mind were things like space pirates, tyrannical government, military ships that might be serving a corrupt leader like Lassic, or neighboring world ships that have been corrupted by Dark Force. The rules for space combat in Phantasy Star are very similar to those used in Esper Genesis. If you're interested, I have a video on breaking down the basic rules for Starship combat in Esper Genesis, as well as another video on some pitfalls to avoid when you're running space combat in any TTRPG. Links in the description. For anybody who prefers to play a support-type character, there's several options. The Savant class with the Doctor subclass is the primary support role, being a healer. The Savant's Machinist subclass is also a support role, though somewhat opposite of the Doctor, as it focuses more on controlling the battlefield over healing the party. The Mystic class has a subclass that functions more as a support role, having an ability that allows them to forego attacks to instead heal their allies. And all professions in the game outside of the warrior and the operative can gain access to the res technique, res being a technique that allows you to heal yourself and others. While they don't gain techniques, both the warrior and the operative have some sort of special ability that allows them to heal themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if the warrior's is very similar to the 5th edition fighter's ability to take a second wind. While I did mention earlier that there aren't rules to support a storyteller in creating their own unique equipment for their stories, there are rules for the players to craft equipment for their characters. This would include their characters using tools to craft the equipment that's listed in the core book, rather than having to find somebody to sell it to them. And while we're talking about crafting rules, it's confirmed that at the end of the adversary section where all the monsters live, there are templates for creating your own enemies, and these are said to be versatile enough to create monsters of any challenge rating for your party. And finally, when characters cast techniques, they use technique points to do so. When characters run out of technique points, they can try and push their limits and cast the technique anyways. Doing so puts the character at risk of pushing too hard and hurting themselves in the process. That's everything of note I was able to get out of the September Twitch stream. Make sure you check it out when Skydawn Game posts it to their own YouTube channel. With the game almost in our hands, I've noticed there's a lot of new people joining the Discord channel, and it's a lot chattier lately. People are asking questions about the new RPG, they're sharing ideas about their campaigns they're planning, and brainstorming around Phantasy Star timelines and lore. So it's a pretty great community. If you're interested, make sure you join us, and that's it. That's the show, and until next time, see you, Space Cowboy.